The final round of the Valero Texas Open carried the kind of tension that makes golf worth watching. Robert McIntyre, the 29-year-old Scotsman who had already made a name for himself on both sides of the Atlantic, stood on the 18th tee at TPC San Antonio, holding a 3-shot lead. The galleries were loud, the moment was his, and somewhere far away in South Florida, the defending Masters champion was doing something entirely different. And Rory McIlroy was not in the field that week, had not been in the field for weeks, and the question that hung over every conversation at the tournament had nothing to do with McIntyre's scorecard. It had everything to do with whether the man who finally completed his career, Grand Slam in 2025, is be healthy enough to defend the green jacket he had spent 14 years chasing, McIlroy's. Its absence from the Valero Texas Open was not a last-minute decision. It was the product of a month that had tested him physically and mentally in ways that even his most difficult seasons never quite had. The trouble started at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, where he had played 2 solid rounds and sat comfortably. Inside the top 10, he was warming up in the gym before his 3rd round, moving through a routine he had performed hundreds of times when something shifted in his lower back. He described it as a small twinge on a hinge movement, the kind of thing that sometimes means nothing and sometimes means everything. By the time he reached the driving range 30 minutes before his tee time, the twinge had become muscle spasms serious enough to force a withdrawal. It was only the 2nd withdrawal of his PGA Tour career, and for a player whose reputation had been built in large part on his physical durability, it landed hard. The days that followed brought little comfort. Golf Channel's Todd Lewis received a text from McIlroy that contained one word capable of changing the entire conversation. The back, McIlroy wrote, was being more stubborn than expected. He was staying home in South Florida to continue treatment rather than traveling. That single adjective, stubborn, told the golf world everything it needed to know. This was not a minor strain that rest and ice would resolve by Thursday. This was something that required sustained attention and an honest reassessment of what the next few weeks would look like. The Arnold Palmer withdrawal had been alarming. The text message confirmed that the alarm was justified. The Players' Championship was supposed to serve as the proving ground, the tournament that would demonstrate whether McIlroy's back had responded to treatment, and whether his game could find its footing before the major season arrived. He made it to TPC Sawgrass, though his status was uncertain until the final hours before his opening round. He made the cut barely, by birdieing the last hole of his 2nd round to squeak through on the number. It was 11 shots off the lead, and any realistic chance at the title was gone, but he was playing, and that felt like something worth holding on to. It did not hold on to its value for long. Over the final 2 rounds, he finished at even par, tied for 46th. 13 shots behind winner Cameron Young. His ball striking was actually fine, ranking 3rd in the field off the tee, but he lost more than 5 strokes on the greens across the week, a number that almost defies explanation for a player of his caliber. McIlroy pointed to the rust as the culprit, and he was candid about where it showed up most. The short game, particularly downhill chips that required him to bend just a little further than comfortable, exposed the hesitancy that comes with protecting an injury. Every time the movement approached the edge of what his back would tolerate, something in his swing instinctively pulled back. It was not dramatic, it was not visible from the gallery, but it was real, and it cost him. He acknowledged after the final round that the week had felt strange, that the time away had left him feeling disconnected from the rhythms that usually come naturally. He said there were a couple of things to work on, which was about as close to frustration as McIlroy tends to get in public. What followed the Players' Championship was a decision that surprised people who know how McIlroy operates. He has always been a player who believes in competitive repetitions, grinding through difficult weeks to find his form rather than retreating to the practice range. He has played through pain before, including a ruptured ankle ligament in 2015 and a rib stress fracture in 2017, and has more often than not found a way to compete at a high level despite the discomfort. This time he chose differently. After a loss in a TGL playoff, he confirmed that the Masters would be his next competitive event. No Houston Open, no Valero Texas Open, just rest, recovery, and a return to Augusta when the moment actually demanded his presence. The calculus behind that decision was straightforward, even if the execution required discipline. 3 weeks without. Tournament golf carries real risk. The rust he felt at Sawgrass does not evaporate on its own. And there is no substitute for the pressure testing that only competition can provide. But McIlroy weighed that risk against the alternative, showing up at Augusta, physically compromised. Playing 4 rounds on one of the most demanding courses in the world, with a back that had already shown its willingness to shut things down. Without warning, and he chose to protect himself, he framed it simply. He was not going to push his body with the major season on the horizon. That sentence, quiet as it was, represented a meaningful shift in how he was approaching the moment. The mental dimension of all this has received less attention than the physical. But McIlroy himself suggested it may have been the harder battle. He admitted after the Players that a back injury never fully leaves your awareness once it has announced itself. Every swing carries a small question mark. Every deep bend, every aggressive rotation, every movement that pushes slightly beyond comfortable range triggers a background process of monitoring and caution that is genuinely exhausting over the course of a tournament week. When you add to that the particular weight of defending a major championship, the obligations that come with being the reigning Masters champion, including the Champions Dinner, the Augusta National Women's Amateur, and the drive, chip, and putt finals, the total load becomes considerable. Paul McGinley, one of the more thoughtful voices in golf commentary, spoke to the challenge with characteristic directness. He noted that defending the Masters is uniquely difficult because the champion is pulled in so many directions before the first competitive shot is ever struck. The dinner on Tuesday evening, the events surrounding the women's amateur, the engagement with young players at the putting green competition, all of it consumes energy and focus that a player would otherwise direct entirely toward preparation. McGinley was honest about his concern that McIlroy was coming in slightly off the boil, that the combination of injury, missed tournaments, and obligations might add up to a difficult week. But he also said, with equal honesty, that you simply do not discount Rory McIlroy at Augusta National, a course that suits his game and a place where he carries the specific and powerful memory of winning less than 12 months ago. McIlroy has been through something like this before, though not quite this exact configuration of circumstances. In 2015, he arrived at Augusta as the defending champion after winning 2 majors the previous year and discovered that the pressure of defending was heavier than he had anticipated. He finished tied for 4th, which is a result most players would accept gratefully, but it was not what he wanted, and he took lessons from it that he has carried forward. He has spoken since about learning that you cannot force a peak, that you have to trust the preparation you have done and let the tournament come to you rather than trying to grab it before it arrives. Whether those lessons will be enough this week remains genuinely unknown. The back is reportedly doing better, which is encouraging without being definitive. The game showed signs of sharpening, even during the difficult week at Sawgrass, and McIlroy has a long history of finding another level when Augusta specifically demands it. He is also, it should be said, a player who has spent essentially his entire professional life answering questions about whether he was mentally and physically ready for the biggest moment. And he has answered those questions correctly often, enough that dismissing him based on a difficult month would be a mistake. Robert McIntyre lifted the Valero Trophy and earned his spot at Augusta on his own terms. The rest of the field was already sharpening its game, building momentum, arriving. At the first major of the year, with competitive rounds in their legs and fresh confidence in their hands, McIlroy arrives differently, with rest and recovery as his preparation, with belief as his foundation, and with the particular motivation that comes from knowing what it feels like to finally win the thing you have spent your whole career reaching for. He said this week feels different, said it feels like his. The golf world will find out soon enough whether that belief is enough to carry him back into the most iconic jacket in sports.